Hi everyone. So we're going to do a presentation about graphic organizers today, which are going to help you enhance your distance learning materials. So first we're going to talk about what is a graphic organizer. And before I lose a bunch of you, because I know that this is review, I'm hoping you'll still get something new out of this presentation. So a graphic organizer, graphic means visual. So anytime that you're taking information and reorganizing it in a more visually pleasing way, that is a graphic organizer. There are so many kinds of graphic organizers, and some are better than others. We're going to talk specifically about ones that we like to use at Kopila Valley. But the great thing about a graphic organizer is that it knows no limits. Like any grade level, any subject can use a graphic organizer. So thinking, okay, like graphic organizers, I'm taking information and I'm reorganizing it, but why do we do that? Well, human brains don't like large chunks of text, okay? Like this is how we feel when we see something that looks like this and we are expected to read it. Okay. So, what we're requiring of our students is we're saying, okay, here's a big chunk of information. I want you to show me that you know what's going on in this text to make it more accessible so that when you're going back to study for an exam or to review, you don't have to read this text again. You can just reference your graphic organizer. So actually, the textbooks already have a lot of graphic organizers embedded in them. And I'm going to show you also an example of social media. I know that everyone's on social media, and to try to help us kind of expand our thought of what a graphic organizer is. So this is an example from, I believe it's the fourth grade social book. And what we're looking at is they're learning about different cultures. But then what they did is after the long section of the chapter, they did this points to remember. And so what they did was they said, okay, here's the most important part of the text that you just read. And here is like a summary in 3 points of what the most important information is. And you also notice that it's a different color. So that draws our eye. It has this little like highlighted thing, points to remember. And so our human brains, we see that and our eyes are automatically drawn to it. And it's only including the most important information. So instead of having to look at something like this, we just look at this and say, okay, that's manageable. Here's another example from the Blink Now Instagram. So like on an Instagram post or a Facebook post, you have the image, you have the graphic, and then you also have the caption. So the caption is where you're getting that big long chunk of text that's giving you information. But what the image is giving you is just what's most important. So maybe if you're really interested, you can go read the caption. But really, the only thing you need to know is that 700 sets of PPE were given to the quarantine camps. That's the most important. So again, what we want our students to be able to do is to look at those big chunks of text and be able to make them pleasant and accessible like these images here. Okay. So the reason that we talk so much about graphic organizers is because when we want to accommodate as many different learning styles as possible, because everyone learns differently. I know some of you have done an assessment before where you try to figure out, am I a visual learner? Do I learn best by seeing? Am I an auditory learner where I learn best by listening? Or am I a kinesthetic learner, which is when you learn best by doing? Those are the three learning types. And everyone is a combination of the three of those. But the more ways that we can present information, especially using graphic organizers, the more students are going to be able to understand what we're talking about, right? Because maybe we do have some students that can read this and understand it and they'll be totally fine. But we have a lot of students where it's like, even just seeing that large chunk of text, they're like, whoa, right? So it's our job to help them. It's our job to help make the information more accessible so that more students are learning and understanding. Okay, so graphic organizers are an amazing way to take notes. So if you are given a big amount of text, or similarly, if you are giving a lecture, you could have students take notes in a graphic organizer format to help them organize the information. Taking notes during a lecture is a really helpful skill, but if students are writing down every single word you say, that's not going to be super effective, and they're going to look back on those notes and it's going to be just very overwhelming. So by teaching kids visual note taking, right? And these are skills that we have to teach them when they're younger. They can make the information, it makes the information more accessible. So there are some interesting facts in this visual. This is from Education Week. So adding a visual increases repetition. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Retention, which means remembering, by 65%. So by adding a visual, it's allowing students to remember 65% more the information. It can increase comprehension and data retention by 22 to 30%. So again, more retention, more understanding. And it also just allows the students to create personal meaning and relevance. So it allows them, like, okay, what's the best way for me to remember this information? So it gives them a little bit of autonomy, a little bit of control over their learning. And so what we're doing by using graphic organizers and teaching students how to use them is we're essentially helping them figure out how they learn. Another really great way to use graphic organizers is to prepare for a writing assignment. And so some of you might have seen this before. We used this years ago, but this is an elaborated paragraph graphic organizer. And so at the top, you have your little fact or opinion. So maybe my fact is like tigers are the best animal. And then it allows you these places are where you're going to put all your supporting sentences. We'll talk more about this in an upcoming presentation, but many students, especially when they're learning, maybe in like 4th or 5th grade, how to write a paragraph, having a graphic organizer can make a really, really big difference in helping them organize their ideas. The other thing is that graphic organizers can be a really good opportunity to assess your students. So if you say, okay, you have to read these pages in your textbook and make a graphic organizer of your choosing to show me what you learned, what the most important information is, that's going to give you, the teacher, a lot of information about what the students understood. Because maybe you're going to look at their frame or their graphic organizer and be like, whoa, they really struggled to find what's important. So a graphic organizer can be a really, really great assessment tool for you as well. Okay. It also just helps you add variety to your instruction, right? We don't want to be doing one type of instruction all the time. So here we have the learning styles that we talked about before: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, seeing, hearing, and doing. And yeah, it'll just help you keep it, I don't know, varied in your classroom, and reaching all of those visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners. Okay, so the type of graphic organizers that we're going to focus on in this series of videos are called brain frames. Okay, so framing as in like, okay, like let's find a way to frame information in a way that's easy for us to understand. So brain frames it's an official system, right? Like you can get trained on these, which I've been trained on them. But the best thing about brain frames, and frame just means organizer, is that there are only 6 kinds, and these 6 kinds can be used for anything. Like basically any sort of assignment or information or subject or grade level, you can find a frame that matches what you need. Okay, so the 6 core types are telling. So telling frames are over here. And then we have sequencing. Sequencing frames are good for showing events in order. Showing relationships, that's this one. This one's a little bit tricky, so we'll definitely do a separate presentation on that one. Categorizing, I know that many of you have used the categorizing frame before, so it's talking about traits of different categories like vertebrates and invertebrates or what have you. Showing causes and effects, so talking about why things happen, that's the causes and effect frame. And then lastly, a comparing and contrasting frame, which is kind of like a Venn diagram, if you're familiar with that, but it's showing the similarities and differences between two things. So the great thing about brain frames is that it's going to help us create common language across the school. So I'll use my school as an example, the Churchill School in New York, where I worked previously. We rolled out the brain frames system, and I teach middle school. So I was teaching 6th graders. And when they came to 6th grade from the elementary school, they already knew what all these different frames were. And so even though the transitions between the grade levels are challenging, it was like, oh, okay, this is something that I'm already comfortable with. So if my teacher tells me we're going to make a telling frame, I already know what that is. It's not like there's a totally separate system for when you're in 5th grade, and then when you're in 6th grade, you do it in this way, right? Be like, oh, like with Solonimus in class 3, we did this kind of graphic organizer, and now I'm in 5 class with Sweatimus, and like we're doing something totally different. So it's going to help our kids be comfortable. And obviously, the information is going to change and the complexity is going to change, but the organizers won't change. And it really helps you as a teacher too. If you only have to choose between these 6 different types of things, it's going to give you a lot of guidance. Be like, okay, which frame should I be using? And you don't have to be searching on the internet for different types of organizers, and then you'll have to teach your students how to use them. So we really want to try to increase our use of brain frames. And I will say, I have seen tons of use of brain frames at Kopila over the years. And I have seen, like, across the grade levels where it's like, okay, we did this in class 1 and now we're going to do it in class 2. It's the same thing. And it really makes a big difference for kids. So that's the end of this introduction. And in the next presentation, we're going to look specifically at telling frames. And obviously, it's pretty simple to describe what a telling frame is, but what I'm going to try to do for you in these presentations is give really clear examples of how you can use these frames in your classroom, and examples from primary and from secondary, from science and from English, and all the different, all the different classes and subjects and all that. Okay? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the telling frame presentation.